My name is Oliver Pickard and I play with classic cars on some of the world's most beautiful roads for a living. That Porsche rear engine blood shining through. In 2020 I went to Retromobile Paris and saw some of the most exquisite, handmade, hand-finished and expensive cars on the planet. On returning home, the pandemic hit and I decided that the time for dreaming was done. I wanted to build my dream. I wanted to build the car that I had been designing since childhood. So with the help of my aerospace engineer and rallyist father, Andrew, we set about trying to find the perfect project. We found it rotting in a side yard in Normandy. Crashed, twisted, broken, buckled and fire damaged, a GTM. We dragged it home and tore it apart. Re-engineered from the ground up. Engine, suspension, fuel system, drivetrain, even the seating position. Everything. Bespoke, one of one. This is Project Mosquito. Good morning and welcome to the workshop. In this week's video I'm going to be turning this jigged up facsimile of suspension into an actual functional suspension.
Good morning. So we're gonna cut 3 more of these out. Our uprights, our turrets for our suspension. So I've already marked one out, and it's important if you're doing a job like this, mark the first one that you use as a template. Because if you use the second one and mark it out, or even the third one, if there's any slight difference between this one and this one, you make the error bigger every time. So use the original one as the template.
Right then, so I guess we should explain what's happening. Dad wasn't happy with these tubes that he made in last week's video because they're originally derived from bolts, aren't they? Yeah. In fact, they were the handles from the sheet metal brake that were made. But they were at one point in their life zinc coated, and because they were for like buildings and stuff, Dad didn't know exactly the tensile strength and stuff of the bolts. And so yesterday Dad zipped off, have you got one of them new ones? And went and got some more round stock that was proper and made these. And these have some little flanges on them. Is that the right term? So that when you put the thing with the hole up against it, it actually rests on this edge here. And It gives a much stronger weld when you weld round it, rather than it just being welded to the hole. And so hopefully it will be much stronger. And this stuff was super hard as well. It's like shaft steel. It had ages to machine these up, which is why we didn't film it. Because the last thing we need is like 2 videos with exactly the same montage in. As much as I love a good weld montage, lathe montage. Turning montage? Lathe montage?
Turning montage.
Yeah. But super hot today. It's about 30, what?
35 degrees.
35 degrees in the workshop.
So
which
we've gone from -11.
Yeah. -11, -12 to hot. If you're American and it's Fahrenheit, just know it's hot. In fact, it's too hot. That's better. Bit neater, isn't it? Well, Dad, it's beginning to feel a lot like lunchtime.
I'm starving.
Yeah. Right, so before we go, I just want to talk about push rods and why we're not using push rod suspension. Because there's a few advantages to push rod suspension, isn't there?
There is. Got less unsprung weight.
Less unsprung weight, so you are removing the shock absorber and the weight of the shock absorber from your suspension and wheel weight by putting it somewhere else and having a rod and a rocker instead. Aerodynamics.
Yep.
Yeah, because you get more airflow through that area, which can be actually really good for cooling your brakes and stuff like that. And rising rate suspension.
Yeah.
So your spring rate gets stiffer the faster you go, or rather the
more downforce.
The more downforce is applied onto it when the more the spring is compressed, the stiffer the spring gets. That's the better way of saying it, yeah. However, there are reasons why we haven't gone that route, isn't there?
Yeah, well, we've got, to start with, we've got an upside down shock absorber. So all the weight from the shock absorber, 80% of the weight, is suspended from the chassis.
Because all the shock body's up here.
There's only the spring, the piston, and the bottom joint. It's actually being held by the wishbone.
Yep.
All the rest of it is held from the top.
Yep.
So that's less unsprung weight to start with.
Yep, and on top of that, as far as rising rate suspension goes, we don't need rising rate suspension because we don't have a lot of wings and stuff. The bottom of the car will be flat, and of course there'll be some aerodynamic downforce from things like the windscreen being so raked back and things like that. But it's not enough to. We're not going to run big chin splitters and stuff like that. It's not a time attack car. It's not a hill climb car. Even though it'd be nice to do a hill climb in it, it's not enough to require a rising rate suspension. And these shock absorbers are actually a rising rate shock absorber. Being an off-road shock absorber, after a certain amount of travel, it becomes very difficult to compress that shock absorber.
Yep.
So in theory, it would be a rising rate even if it wasn't, because the shock gets stiffer, not the spring, which isn't ideal, but it's something. And it will stop you bottoming out and hitting the bump stop, and allows you to have more travel without having a big bump stop. Aerodynamics, it's got a body on it, and there's a load of room between here and the brakes. The same on the rear. And another thing is the relocating of the shock absorber.
Yeah, you've got to put it somewhere.
You've got to put it somewhere. And I didn't want to end up with the aerial atom thing of putting them up on the roll bar or on any of the chassis and moving weight from down low up high, because shock absorbers are quite heavy. And that's why people want to get rid of them from the unsprung weight.
Yeah, shock absorber and spring.
But a shock and a spring's decently heavy. And so if you move all four up here, any weight that's above the centre point of the wheel, when the car is at static ride height, which now it's at full droop, but the centre point's usually about there, yeah?
Yeah.
So anything above this point here is going to make your car roll more. When you put it into a corner, the heavy bit wants to become the bottom of the car, and therefore your car rolls. The more weight that you have under that point, it actually counteracts the roll. It still wants to go to the outside of the corner, but because the weight above wants to go one way, the weight the other end wants to go the other way. And so it can help counteract roll, so it gives you really good handling. And that's why they put dry sumps on engines and drop them as low as they can. It's why we've dropped the engine as low as we can. So it's a bit silly to go to all of that effort and then mount your shock absorber up here. So you want to get it all as low as we could. And we could have mounted them kind of here, couldn't we?
Yeah.
But it's...
Well, there's a fuel tank to go in there.
There's a lot of stuff to go in there. It would have made the fuel tank smaller, and it would have required using rose joints or Johnny joints or spherical joints and push rods and stuff.
And then you've got your bearing as well.
And your bearings and all that, and that's all complication. That's all added stuff, and all of that added stuff means more working out. It means more money that can be spent on other things, because it's not like we don't have plenty to spend money on. It means more time, and it means more opportunities for things to go wrong. The more things you have, the more things that there are to fail. And that's a huge deal when you're talking a car that you want to drive a long way. And if you mess it up, as Rob Dom found out with his 4-rotor RX-7, you can actually end up with falling rate suspension, which isn't good. And then you end up having to redo it all. And so it was a lot of work I didn't want to do. We've got really good shocks as it is. They're nice and low, and it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Like in the application at the rear, they just fit perfectly. They're even nicely inboard. And there's no reason to mess with something that works beautifully. Now, we did consider it, and an earlier version of this car did have pushrod suspension, because MX5 suspension is famous for not having any clearance for your coilover. This window is tiny, but it only needs a little bit of massaging, not a lot of massaging, so that's not so bad. But yeah, it just wasn't necessary. And there are legitimate reasons for pushrod and pull rod suspension, but they just weren't really applicable on this car. And the other thing is that all of that added gubbins all adds weight. So you're talking what, 1 kilo to between 1 and 5 kilos a corner. Yeah. Oh yeah. If you're lucky in added weight,
you've got 20 extra kilos on the car.
Yeah.
For no good reason.
If you go right, Gordon Murray on that new T50 thing, he said it adds a kilo, right? And he said, but it was worth that, because that thing has downforce, and because it has a big fan on it that sucks it down to the ground, it needs that rising rate shock absorber, because the faster it goes, the heavier it gets. That's how downforce works. I don't like the term downforce, it's negative lift. Because that's more accurate. The more negative lift you have, the functionally heavier your car is, and so you end up running out of suspension. And the way that they get around that on like an LMP car or like a Le Mans GT car, like a Porsche GT2 or whatever, GT3, whatever they use at Le Mans, is they put massive bump stops in. And so when they're on the straight, they scream down the straight, the aero pushes the car down, and the car sits on a really big bump stop. And you basically have very little suspension. It's like having mini suspension.
All the suspension's in your tyre then.
Yeah. And then you get to the end of the straight, you slow down, and your shock recovers. But we don't have that much downforce, and we just simply don't need it. And so it was a weight penalty that I wasn't willing to pay. And it was a lot of work and money that couldn't be spent in other places, and making other things nicer and other things lighter. And that's the thing. Are you going to spend your money adding weight, or would you rather spend that money taking weight away? And when you're making a car, like, it's really easy to, when you sit down and you first start designing your car, it's really easy to act like you've got all the money in the world. Yeah. Oh, we can do this, oh, we can do this, because you start with this big bucket of ideas, don't you? But the reality of it is that you've only got so much money to spend. Yeah. And if you spend money in one area, it means taking money from something else. Yeah. Or not necessarily spending as much money on something as you could. And I think it's a very good thing to be reductive when you're building a car. And I know there are a lot of people watching these videos, this is why I'm saying this, that are planning car builds now. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there on YouTube that have a lot of money, and there's a lot of people on YouTube that throw 20 grand at a car in a video. But if you're a normal human being and you have like responsibilities and a life and kids and a partner and stuff. It doesn't mean that you can't do this stuff. It just means that you've got to be cleverer about it. Cleverer? Is that a word?
The thing is, don't alter it. Once you've started to do something, carry on.
Yeah, don't change your plan halfway through.
If you change your plan halfway through, you think, oh, I'll put a different engine in or whatever.
So design your car from start to finish first. Keep your ethos. Okay, I'll keep the same ethos the whole way through. You see that on everything from like Grand Design's house programs to anything. You've got to stick to your guns, haven't you?
Yeah.
And we save money by buying like second-hand coilovers, which are in really, really good condition, and they're really good quality ones. Could have bought some brand new, like lesser quality ones that weren't rebuildable.
Yeah.
But
at least these you can rebuild them.
You can rebuild them.
Buy all the parts.
Yeah, and they've got all skiff bearings and all that. But we saved money by buying these because we got those like cheaper than a lot of cheap ones. I bought second-hand wheels. I bought 2 sets of second-hand wheels and put them together, but still they were a lot cheaper than some. They were a lot cheaper than a lot of Chinese wheels, if I'm honest. But that's because they were incorrectly listed on a for sale site, and that's the thing. If you don't have the money, you've just got to be really, really clever with it. You know, using MX5 suspension rather than designing all my own stuff means that these wishbones are horrendously light. They're fantastic. You're not going to get a tubular wishbone that weighs that little. No. You're just not. And that's that everyone assumes that tubular stuff's lighter, and a lot of the time it's just not.
Has it got to be chrome moly?
Well, someone said to me, oh, well, can you not just make your own chrome moly wishbones? And I'm like, well, chrome moly is really expensive. Then you've got to make jigs. Then you've got to get fittings. You buy your ball joints and all of that. And then you've got to treat the chrome moly after it's been welded. And it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to do it. And that's the thing, you've really got to pick your battles, haven't you? Yep. You know, and using this cold rolled, not cold rolled, is it? It's cold drawn seamless tubing was a massive expense in this build. It was really expensive, but it's a heck of a lot stronger than box section. Yeah. And so we would have spent as much box section in box section to get like a slightly heavier chassis that wasn't as good. Yeah. And so by using a more expensive and stronger material, we're able to use less of it. You know, you've got to pick your fights, and that's important. You've got to like note down what's really important to you in your build. Like we really wanted a really good heater. You know what I mean? These things are important, and so many people would put a little race heater in, and it's just not enough. And so it's really important to I've said this, in fact, I made a video on my other channel called something like Home Renovation Secrets or something like that. The title might have changed, I might have changed it. But it's all about advice on how to build your home. And my advice on how to build your home is very similar to how to build your project. Be very honest, stick to what works, design it all first.
Yeah, if you're making a track car, make a track car.
Yeah.
Well, this is a road car.
And that's why I'm staying away from spherical joints and ball joints and stuff like that, because like you had them on your rally car, didn't you? Yeah. And they last a year. Yeah,
they last a year. Then even if you buy top quality ones, they last a year. Then they all need replacing. And you think, oh well, it's a year away. That doesn't matter.
No.
Well, that year comes around quick.
It's another bill.
Maybe you might have 8 to buy.
Yeah.
And they're 40 quid each.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I looked at Johnny joints, which are what a lot of off-road guys use, which is a rebuildable ball joint. They're a beautiful thing. And they are immortal, but they're like 85 quid each. Which, that's more than I spent on my front suspension, not including the shock absorbers, but that's more than I spent on the arms and the uprights and the bottom wishbones, and that's just for some screw-in ball joints. It just doesn't make sense. And so you know.
And it's a road car.
Yeah.
You know, but spherical joints transmit more noise, more vibration.
It's not just that. I can actually go to a Mazda dealer and buy these. Yeah. I can just buy those bushes, or I can go to a bush company that does polyurethane bushes and get polyurethane bushes.
Which last an awful long time.
Yeah. And it's not going to rattle the car to death either. And that's something that on our rough roads you really have to take into consideration, is that there's a reason why racing cars are so rattly.
Yeah.
And don't make your road car a racing car. It's just not, it's not worth it. Because
you end up with
you end up with a compromised racing car and a horrible road car. And racing cars, rally cars make really good road cars. But racing cars, like a track car, is a terrible road car. There is no worse car in this world than a track car. And everyone goes, oh, it's a racing car for the road, isn't it? That's one of those, like, you know, publicity spin things that they say. And it's just not true. Because racing cars suck on the road. And that's why everyone puts them on a trailer. But yeah, just be honest about it. And that's why no push rods. You know, push rods would have looked cool, and they would have looked cool in a thumbnail, and they'd have made a cool video. But at the end of the day, it's pointless just for the sake of it. And that's what you gotta remember. It's not just for the sake of it. Everything has to have at least 2 reasons to exist. And if it doesn't have 2 reasons to exist, you redesign it. These are not final fixings, it's all mock-up for now, until we know what we need. As far as lengths and stuff.
And we'll get all brand new high tensile bolts.
Well, Dad, that is a very pretty suspension mount.
Oh, we're getting there now.
You've excelled yourself, sir.
Yeah, well, we've got the kit of parts on the other side. We've made them as we've been making this. We made the parts of the other side at the same time.
Yep, so that can all go together next week.
It's like just basically a mirror image of this.
Yep.
So we can put that together for next week.
And it's been a very difficult thing to make because it's all floating in midair, and because it has to be millimetrically perfect, it's been a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's worked, and let's face it, we did this to ourselves because we chose the hardest possible way to make all of this.
Far easier just to make a bracket from there to there and then weld another piece on and do it in stages. Well, we made it all completely out of one piece. So the geometry has to be perfect from here to these 2 tubes. The same at the other side.
And it's quite apt that it's going together in Pride Month, this, because none of it's straight. There's not a single 90 degree or 45 degree angle in this entire thing, which has made it's very organic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which has made it very difficult to make. There's about 9 hours that I'm going to have to edit out of this week's video of us just filing a little bit out each. You know, it's been that file it, check it, file it, check it. It's been a lot of that, but I'm really happy, and that is super lightweight. It weighs very, very little, and that's the great thing about this car. There's no subframes.
No. We do have to put another piece of metal on the back here. Yeah. Which will also be drilled.
Yep.
But I can't do that until we strip everything down. That'll be the last thing I do.
Yeah, because you've got to see, it all has to be seam welded. When we take, next week's video, we're going to do that side, and then we're going to take the entire car apart, put it on the table, and seam weld every tube and everything. and completely go over it before it's painted.
Yeah.
But you can't get inside the boxes to weld stuff if it's a box. So we've got to kind of do it in sections. But it's going to be super, super lightweight.
Yeah.
And
very incredibly strong.
Which is what we've wanted all along. You know, the stronger and stiffer that it is, the better. And it's not done in like big things, like big pieces of carbon fibre and stuff like that. It's done in little things, like every single one of these holes that we've drilled all adds up to all material. Yeah. And in the end, it'll add up to, you know, 20, 30 or 40 kilos. And I'm super, super happy, and it's so pretty. And because it's all integrated on one piece, it's so strong. Because everything is on a different angle, everything's pushing and pulling on a different, in a different direction, I suppose. And the proper term has left my brain, but it's so strong because it all holds itself together. It all, you know, reinforces each other. So happy. So thank you all for supporting this channel by liking, commenting and subscribing. We always read every single one of your comments, don't we?
We do.
And I reply to every single one that I can. And of course, my social media is down in the description. If you're watching this on Facebook, by the way, make sure you leave your comments here because that really helps the videos. It really helps boost the videos in the algorithm and helps more people find these videos. And if you're really enjoying these videos and you're not subscribed, if you've watched a few of them, what are you doing? Subscribe! It's actively helping us build this car. Like, you want to do something nice, share these videos with your friends and subscribe. It's free and for nothing, and you get videos of us welding, cutting and grinding every week to build a mental little supercar. And so thank you for supporting the channel. And after the beauty shots, because I know everybody likes those, there will be a button that looks like my face, and that will be to subscribe to this channel. There'll be a button with the cat, Miriam and myself on it, and that is to subscribe to my other channel, which is Pickard Home and Garden, because we changed the name. The reason why I changed the name, people couldn't find it. So it's now got a new name, but it's the same videos. It's the home, and it's my home and the garden. And there'll be the playlist for this, and of course a random video that I haven't thought of yet. So thank you all for watching. Please be awesome to each other, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. More steering lock than a GTM has ever had.